Manx Radio's update.
Well, faster my good evening and welcome to Update here on Manx Radio. 30 minutes of the latest news and everything you need to know about what's happening on the Isle of Man. On the way, the Health Minister's been facing questions from backbench politicians for the first time since an embargoed press release was leaked, which outlines a series of cuts the Health Service was planning to make. We'll hear about the consequences and implications of dog worrying livestock after recent incidents have appeared on social media. And plans to align the minimum wage with the living wage by the end of the year have stalled, so we'll find out why that is. It's 1 minute past 5. Let's get the latest news headlines with Chanel Suku.
The Health Minister says planned cuts to Manx care services were only changed after she and her department intervened. Claire Christian says around £1 million will be saved, but some MHKs say it will only increase referrals in the next financial year. Douglas East MHK Joni Farragher was among those critical of the cuts.
Does the Minister acknowledge what a major decision this is, how scary this has been for people with health issues across the island, and how let down people are feeling by our health service?
A number of sailings to and from Heysham this week have been cancelled or changed because of spring tides. The steam packet company says conditions within Heysham port don't meet its safety criteria. Sailings from tonight until Sunday's afternoon departure from Heysham will be affected. And a daunting task awaits FC Isle of Man this evening as they travel to face NWCFL Premier Division League leaders Bury. Tonight's tie at Gig Lane pits the island side against a Bury outfit which remains undefeated in the league on home soil. In international news, lawyers for Lucy Letby are calling for an investigation into her case after international experts suggested that there's no evidence that she murdered babies. The panel suggested alternative causes, including natural ones and poor medical care. 5 people have been taken to hospital in Sweden after a shooting at an adult education centre. Local media reports that the gunman is dead, although it's not been confirmed. And Emma Raducanu has lost in the first round of the Abu Dhabi Open. The Brit was beaten in straight sets. Those are your headlines. News at 6.
Thank you, Chanel. And now let's take a look at the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. Largely dry now with clear spells, but still feeling quite breezy and fresh to strong west or southwest winds. Minimum temperature of 5 degrees Celsius in most places, but falling to 2 degrees Celsius on the hills. A fine and dry day tomorrow with sunny intervals and gradually easing winds. Top temperature of 8 degrees Celsius.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
TE Carbon provide new memorial stones, grave renovations, new inscriptions and fire hearths. Visit us at Hope Street, Castletown or at Broadway, Douglas or call 844 440. TE Carbon, here when you need us.
Most builders start with a hammer and saw. Manx Construction start with ideas and imagination. For new build, extension or home office, Manx Construction offer full service from planning to completion. Call Tony on 452 688.
We all need peace of mind. That's where Peace of Mind Manx Will Writing Services can help you. From just £149 plus VAT. Call 671 001 or go to peaceofmind.co.im.
At Bond Fabrics, we're not just a fabric shop. As well as curtains and upholstery and dress and costume fabrics, we've knitting and crocheting wools, made-to-measure curtain and blind service, plus poles and tracks. Visit Strand Street, Douglas, call 611856 or see bondfabrics.im.
4 minutes past 5 now here on Manx Radio, and there's been criticism from some MHKs that cuts to the island's health service won't save money in the long term. A number of measures were announced last week, including temporary reductions to elective care and a pause in non-urgent off-island treatment until the end of March. People who've had appointments cancelled are being told they will be rearranged as early as possible from April. In the House of Keys today, Douglas Central MHK Anne Corlett quizzed the Health Minister Claire Christian about the logic behind the cuts.
The Minister in her original answer said that appointments for paused services would be rescheduled after the 31st of March. So it's not a saving, it's simply pushing a cost over to the next financial year. So my question for the Minister is, does the cost of cancelling and rescheduling appointments make economic sense, as all that's actually being achieved is a delay in spending of approximately 8 weeks?
It's actually a very good question. The predicted impact of the proposal is that there are 60 non-urgent surgical procedures which will be rescheduled as soon as possible after the 31st of March. So she is correct that that cost of those 60 patients will go into that next financial year. There are also around 600 patients that have been affected by these changes over the next 2 months. But 450, which is 75% of these outpatients attending a follow-up appointment with no specific clinical benefit. So those 450 have been validated by the clinicians whether they are needed for clinical benefit. The remaining 25% of those will be rescheduled for as soon as possible after the 31st of March.
The Minister mentioned that 450 patients have been identified as follow-up with no clinical benefit. And my question would be, how has it taken till now to identify that?
You're absolutely right. Why has it taken this long to identify something like that? I would say that it's obviously professional input that we've had from the two specialists. They have looked at the off-island validation. And this is something that they've progressed as part of that work that they've been doing. I can't answer for why it was not done earlier, but I can certainly speak with the department in terms of before I was Minister. Thank you.
Health Minister Claire Christian answering questions in the House of Keys from earlier today. Now let's turn our attention to some of the reaction from today's Keys sitting, and there's already been criticisms about the way that question was handled. One backbencher is questioning the fairness of it. Oncan MHK Julie Edge says she was only allowed one question in today's high-profile discussion on those health cuts, and believes Speaker Juan Watterson should have called on her more often.
Clearly on a really important topic like our healthcare and the urgent question from last week that was being answered this week, I did try to get a second question asked, but I was restricted by the Speaker. He's explained why that is. He only allows 12 questions per question.
If I just interrupt you there, let's just hear what Juan Watterson had to say on that ruling.
I've got a very standard set of criteria which I've been using for the last 8 years for question time that seems to be quite accepted amongst members, which is that if you ask the question you get 3 supplementaries, if it wasn't yours you get 2, and in fairness, in order to make sure that we actually get through the business of the day, there's a cap of 12 overall, and I've been very consistent on that in the last 12 years.
Juan Watterson talking about the rules that he applies, he does have a set of rules.
He has the set of rules, and clearly we have looked at that recently, but I'm beginning to think on really important topics. So under an urgent question,
you think you should be given greater leeway?
I think when it's a really important topic of national interest, there should be, because clearly there was a lot of people wanting to ask questions today, and possibly some didn't even get that opportunity. I'm the voice of my constituents, and I feel that that democratic voice from constituents should be enabled to be heard, and to restrict all members. Well, some members might have got more than one question and others not. So I think for fairness, we do need to look at it. Mr. Thomas came up with a good idea, I think, that we do need to look at when something is a speaker's question, and that might give us more leeway to work with the Speaker as to how. I've certainly already sort of questioned what can we do around this, so I think it does need to be taken further, and clear clarity around the process.
Oncan MHK Julie Edge and Speaker Juan Watterson speaking to John Moss there. It's 5:09.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Now, efforts are underway to strengthen Manx laws on dogs worrying livestock. The Manx National Farmers Union wants tougher penalties to better protect sheep and cattle. Now, PC Louise Kenyuk has told Manx Radio just the mere presence of a dog in a field while sheep are lambing can cause immense stress.
Sheep will gather together if they're stressed in a huddle, and they can actually suffocate from doing so. It doesn't have to be your dog attacking and harming them.
And often what we see is people taking to social media and sharing the aftermath of an incident like this. In terms of from the police's perspective, do you think that every time that this is happening, it is actually reported to you?
I think there's an under-reporting. We're trying to find out the reasons why. I think we can surmise a few of them. Perhaps there's frustration in what happens when it is reported. Perhaps actually it takes a lot of time for the farmers to make reports when they are busy. It's their busiest time of year. There's loads of little reasons behind it. But what we say, and I think NFU would repeat it, is we need to know when these issues are happening, because without that we can't look at patterns. So if we have patterns where they are, we can see if it's the same dog, the same owners. We can see if there's a weakness in the land or the fences surrounding it, and then we get DEFA or the farmers involved. So if we know where they are, we can start seeing if there's an issue and try and do something together to solve it.
And for the dog owners themselves, I mean, ultimately they could potentially lose their own animal if they are found to be on the land and worrying the sheep.
They can, and it still shocks people to this day, and the bare bones of it is lawfully a farmer can shoot to kill an animal on their field if they reasonably believe they are worrying livestock. It's all there in the Act because it shouldn't take place, and they need to have some protection.
PC Louise Kenyuk speaking to Tessa Hawley there. What are your thoughts on that? Do there need to be tougher penalties and stronger laws in place to combat out-of-control dogs? 166 177 is our text number. Now, last month we heard about plans to align the island's minimum wage with the living wage by the end of this year. Proposals were to be put before Tynwald this month, which would have seen the rate increase from £11.45 per hour to £12.25 from the 1st of April, and then up to £13.05 from the 1st of October. Now, however, there has been a change of plan. Lewis Foster reports.
Tynwald will still be asked to approve an increase in the minimum wage, but it will only be that first uplift in April, up to £12.25. But that second planned increase, the one set out for October, is being put to one side while government carries out a review. If we go back to July 2021, you'll remember Tynwald resolved that the two rates, minimum wage and living wage, should achieve parity within 5 years, following a recommendation of a select committee on poverty. That's now a position that the Enterprise Minister Tim Johnston says requires further detailed consideration. It's all about finding balance, he says. And whilst the two-part increase would have been well received by those in need of extra cash, it's fair to say it wasn't quite such a welcome step for those who would eventually end up paying the wage. And that's what the Department for Enterprise and Treasury have put this change of heart down to. In their words, feedback from industry and a range of representatives. In recent weeks, we also heard from the Chamber of Commerce, which said the move would have a significant impact on businesses. There was concern from the agricultural sector too.
It's a difficult one to straddle because, of course, people should be getting a fair wage, but it's going to be very difficult for small business to sustain that.
That was Sarah Comish, General Secretary of the Manx National Farmers Union. So what happens now? Well, in amending these plans, government has also committed to carrying out that review. As Treasury Minister Alex Allinson puts it, they will be carrying out further work on the relationship between the calculation of the living wage and the minimum wage to meet our obligations to the lowest paid workers in our community, while also recognising the challenge for businesses. But first, nothing happens without Tynwald approval. Therefore, the new single proposed increase will be brought before the court at this month's sitting, starting on the 18th of February.
Lewis Foster with that report there, and the Enterprise Minister Tim Johnston will be live on Manx Radio Breakfast tomorrow morning to explain those changes in a little bit more detail. 13 minutes past 5 now, and what more can be done to encourage young people to engage in Manx politics? It's a question we're asking after Manx Radio's live broadcast from Castle Rushen High School earlier today. Speaking to sixth formers, Andy Wint, the presenter of Man in Line, wanted to know how much they knew about Manx politics. He started by asking them, who is our Chief Minister?
OK. Ruby, who's the Chief Minister?
Alf Cannon.
OK. Tom, who's the Treasury Minister on the Isle of Man?
I wouldn't be able to tell you.
OK, in that case, Ben, who's the Treasury Minister on the Isle of Man?
No, I won't be able to tell you either. No.
Jacob, who's the Treasury Minister on the Isle?
Not me.
OK, certainly not you. It's Dr. Allinson, Dr. Alex Allinson. Who's the Education Minister? Leisha, who's the Education Minister? Ruby?
I know her last name's Christian. Is that right?
Not the Education
Not
Minister.
education.
That's the Health Minister.
Oh,
OK.
Daphne... someone?
Daphne Kane. Daphne Kane is there. Has any Manx politician ever been to Castle Rushen High School while you've been here and addressed the students here?
Jason Morehouse comes in.
Okay. Of course, he was a teacher here.
Yeah, so
years ago.
he comes in for quite a few of the school events, and so does Stuart Watterson.
Okay.
But other South ones we don't see at all.
Okay. Do you know anything about Max? But you are entitled to vote. So, I mean, you've got a very valuable thing. People have fought and died for the vote around the world. You've got a vote on the Isle of Man. Do you follow it at all?
I wouldn't say I follow it. Like, I hear about things in the news and I do listen in, but I wouldn't say I follow it closely.
What have you heard?
Oh, I can't really remember, to be fair.
Andy Wint speaking to students at Castle Rushen High School there today on Manor Line. Let's take a look at the latest travel.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Just a couple of things to be aware about. In Onchan until the end of the week, there are temporary lights on Whitebridge Hill, 24 hours a day for water main work. Over in Laxey, a section of Glen Road will be closed near the football club for ground investigation work. That's in place until the 8th of March. On the roads in general, though, there's nothing that the police are telling us about, so if you do spot anything that you think we should be aware of, then please do let us know. As long as it's safe to do so, drop us a message, text 166 177 or studio@manxradio.com. Over at the Steam Packet, no issues, all sailings running as scheduled, and over there at the airport, similarly nothing affected on the arrivals or the departures board.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
16 minutes past 5 now, and Castletown commissioners will lobby the government to progress a new Castle Rushen High School. Board members backed Commissioner Jimmy Cubbin's call, saying the town's growth is limited by the sea and airport and lags behind Peel and Ramsey. The authority argues land behind the school must be used for housing to prevent stagnation. Local Democracy reporter Emma Draper has been speaking to Mr Cubbin.
It's absolutely crucial that Castletown has access to the land at the back of the school, as it's down as future-proof for housing land and potentially up to 400 houses. Castletown's needed houses for 40 years and it hasn't developed, so it's fallen aside as a service town compared to the other regional towns on the island such as Ramsey and Peel. And there's a chance now, and planning are aware of this because it's been written in officers' reports, of a hierarchical flip with Ballasalla. And then once Ballasalla becomes bigger than Castletown as a village compared to a service town, then they can justify shops and all sorts then, like the Crosby Co-op. It's not just about Castle Rushen High School. It's got so much more implications for the future of Castletown, because once access is gone, then it's done forever. It's landlocked or it's tied off because Castletown can't build in many directions because it's got an airport and it's got the sea. So it's limited as to where it can go, and this is the third education minister that I've spoken to now and engaged on this about the importance of holistically the impact this will have on the town. Fourth education minister, and it was smoke and mirrors with Mr Grugeen. Mr Allenson agreed with me about the importance holistically, and then Julie Edge and Daphne Kane all seem to just toe some party line where it's smoke and mirrors and you can't get an answer out of them. Are the Department of Education engaging with planning and economic development to establish the importance for the town holistically instead of just the school? No, I don't think they are.
Are you aware that the land that did have Buchan School on it has been bought by Hertford Homes, therefore maybe building more houses for the town? And what would you say to that?
Well, it's a perfect site for housing, but that's always been in the plan potentially, but Castletown has fallen so far behind. Yes, another 100 houses on that site, but it still needs 400 houses on top of that.
Local Democracy reporter Emma Draper speaking to Commissioner from Castletown Jimmy Cubbin there. And we have contacted the Department of Education, Sport and Culture for comments in relation to some of those that Mr Cubbin made there.
You're listening to the Isle of Man's quintessential daily news and current affairs roundup. Update on Manx Radio.
Coming up to 19 minutes past 5 now, and a Manx charity helping girls in Tanzania says fundraising is challenging when you're up against bigger organisations. The Coral and Pearl Hostels Trust supports schoolgirls and provides a safe house for pregnant teens. Speaking to Chanel Suku, Judy Murambu says fees range from £500 to £1,500.
We had the most terrible tragedy last year, it's not about a year and a half now. Evelina's mother was on a pillion on a motorbike, and they were run into by a van, and she was killed almost immediately. So poor Evelina, who had just started her sixth form, had to be told, "You said goodbye to mother this morning. She's not there anymore." And then there is also Evelina's little brother, who is the only boy that we have, for looking for help and sponsorship, because he was 18 months old when his mother died. Now, actually, Patrick, we think, doesn't really remember his mother, because my daughter-in-law has been there and looked after him all the way through. But we really are going to need sponsorship for Patrick to take him all the way through kindergarten up to where his big sister is now. And then the next one has finished her GCSE level, is waiting for her results and to know what she'll do, hopefully A-levels.
When you were looking to start up a charity, what made you all focus on children?
Partly because I think in so many developing countries, parents can't afford education for everybody in the family, and they will send the boys because they reckon the boys will be the ones who will support them. But we found that the girls, every time we've had a girl come in, even from very tricky circumstances, they have all worked hard, done well. They, as I say, Evelyn's the only one really right way through schooling. The others are in progression all the way down the line. I think they're worth it. Over and over worth it, and it's so sad that they so often miss out on education in these countries.
Judy Murambu from the Coral and Pearls Hostel Trust there, as they continue to campaign for funding to put those 4 children through school. 21 minutes past 5 now, and tinnitus sufferers on the Isle of Man are being urged to come together and get support from one another. This is Tinnitus Awareness Week. The condition affects around 1 in 7 people and is characterised by ringing or buzzing in the ears. For many, though, it is a relatively mild condition, but it can have significant impacts on a sufferer's daily life. The Manx Deaf Society runs a tinnitus support group. Lucy Buxton is the chief exec.
There are so many different causes of tinnitus. It's hard to state one particular cause. For myself, it's something called Meniere's disorder. It could be prolonged exposure to noise. It could be medicine related. It could be sudden noise related. There are so many different causes, unfortunately.
I guess it can be quite debilitating.
It can. At times, I've got used to living with mine, but there are times when I have found it particularly problematic at night time. The sound is always there. You sort of learn to adapt to it, and it's just part of you. But with the Meniere's, it seems to go in phases where the tinnitus will then become a lot louder, and I would have quite happily slammed my head against a wall at times. It's so difficult to live with.
Now, the Manx Deaf Society, what role does the charity play for people who suffer from tinnitus?
We support and run now the tinnitus support group that runs bi-monthly, so the next one will be the last Thursday in March. We have speakers who come in to talk to us, maybe different exercises to try. We've had somebody come and take us through some Alexander technique exercises. We've had some mindfulness. We've had someone talk about the importance of a good sleep hygiene cycle, diet, all sorts of different things. So we support people in that way by running the group. We also have equipment within our equipment library where you can borrow something and see if that will actually help you. We have some pillow speakers. We have different sound generators that can help as well, and someone to talk to. Quite often you can feel quite alone with your tinnitus because no one can see that you've got tinnitus, and trying to explain it to a member of your family or a colleague who's never experienced it or doesn't quite understand how present it can be quite difficult. So coming to a group like this, or coming and chatting with me, or I can put you in touch with somebody else who might be willing to have a word and a chat with you as well.
Lucy Buxton from the Manx Deaf Society speaking there. Let's turn our attention to sport now. And FC Isle of Man face a daunting task this evening as they travel to face the NWCFL Premier Division leaders Bury at Gig Lane. Their hosts are unbeaten at home in the league so far, but FC Isle of Man manager Paul Jones believes his team can thrive off of being considered potential underdogs.
Like every game in this league's a difficult game. Bury top of the table at the moment. They've kind of turned their form around a little bit in terms of the last month. Yeah, it's going to be a really difficult game, and hopefully in front of a big crowd. We're not going to make up the numbers. We've got a plan to cause them some significant problems and do well.
Bury are still undefeated at home in the league so far this season, but you've spoken a couple of times about maybe your players sometimes thrive on that underdog tag. Do you hope that's going to be the case this evening?
Yeah, very much so. They like proving people wrong, and there's a little chip on everyone's shoulder when people don't believe in them or don't think they're capable of stuff, and sometimes that's quite a powerful motivation. The next stage of our development is playing when people expect you to win and when you expect to win, and maintaining those levels. So yeah, I don't think it does us any harm at times to go into games where we know we've got to be right at it to compete and get close to winning a game and give ourselves a chance to win a game. So yeah, I think it comes at a really nice time in the season when we know we're going to have to go on a good long run of getting 3 points. So why not start tonight?
If you were to get some form of result tonight, how big a statement do you think it would be from this group of players in their quest for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think maybe it's only on the Isle of Man where we're kind of, the level that we're at isn't really recognised because people don't see us play as often. I think we're now well respected in this division. We're seen as a very good side, and everyone knows they need to be really mindful of our qualities. So, I think from our point of view, we expect to go and win games of football at this level, and tonight is no different. I don't think it would surprise anybody in our dressing room if we did. It might surprise a few others, and I think that's maybe part of what is driving us on at the moment, is to help maybe people understand just how good a team we are growing into.
Ravens boss Paul Jones speaking there, and Bury versus FC Isle of Man is due to kick off at Gig Lane at 7:45 this evening. Now we're joined by sports editor Rob Pritchard, who's got more sports news. Rob, what can you tell us?
Well, faster, my Christian. First tonight, Ireland pro tennis star Billy Harris and Great Britain have suffered defeat in the opening qualifying round of this year's Davis Cup competition. The GB side slipped to a 3-2 loss at the hands of Japan in Miki at the weekend, with Harris himself losing out in 2 singles matches during the tie. The former Albany and Castown player lost in straight sets to Yoshihito Nishioka 7-5, 6-1, before another straight sets defeat at the hands of former world number 4 Kai Nishikori 6-2, 6-2. Meanwhile, Harris's teammate Jacob Fernley managed to get a singles win on the board, overcoming Nishikori 6-3, 6-3, and the Great Britain squad's other victory came in the doubles, as Joe Salisbury and Neil Skupski narrowly edged out Yasuki Watanuki and Takeru Yazuki in straight sets. Elsewhere, the Isle of Man under-14 girls hockey squad has progressed again in the England Hockey Championships with a 1-0 victory at Garstang at the weekend. As one of 3 Manx squads in action on Sunday, a 37th minute strike from Faith Tier was enough to send the under-14 side to the next stage of the EH under-14 girls Tier 2 plate. Elsewhere, the Isle of Man under-16 girls suffered a dramatic late 3-2 defeat at Chester in the EH under-16 girls Tier 2 knockout competition. All 5 goals came in the second half, with Sophie Partington and Sienna Millward on target for the Manx side. Meanwhile, the women's over-45 Masters team were on the wrong end of a close fought loss at Formby by the same scoreline in the EH over-45's Tier 1 knockout championship. Donna Harrison bagged both goals for the Isle of Man as they fell to defeat on Merseyside. And finally, German rider David Datzer will join Brian McCormack as the Roadhouse Macau team for this year's Isle of Man TT races. It's been confirmed both competitors will run the team's BMW M1000RR machinery in the 1000cc classes. Elsewhere, the duo will campaign Triumph Power in the Supersport category under the banner of Global Robots PHR Performance. On top of those commitments, 41-year-old McCormack is also planning to take on the Super Twin class on a Global Roots Aprilia.
Thank you for that, Rob. Now, naturally, FC Isle of Man are up against some tough competitions with Bury. Can you give us a predicted score?
Very difficult to do that, but I think on paper at least, very much in favour of Bury at the moment. Undefeated at home this season and top the league. FC Isle of Man, tough task on their hands, but certainly not impossible.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Rob. That is all from Update this evening. Coming up next is Island Life with a rewind of Terry Kringle in conversation with George MacDonald-Fraser. Then we'll have Chris Kinley. He's got greatest hits from 6:30. John Barker will be along with the folk show from 9 o'clock. And then, of course, Dave Moore will be here on After Hours. I'll be back tomorrow, but until then, take care.